have given the world some of the most powerful and memorable songs in pop history.
They're legends. They're living legends.
You know it immediately, that style, that sound. It's very evocative. It just gets in there somehow.
Their music has stood the test of 5 decades and is celebrated the world over.
There was no hype that they had to live up to. They created their own hype.
But 40 years ago, it was a different story. The band fell apart and Abba slipped into obscurity.
I think they were just sick of it by that point.
Suddenly, Abba began looking a little bit passé.
We tell a remarkable tale that spans 4 decades. How Benny and Björn experimented with new music and new artists.
It was an absolute thrill. I couldn't believe it that we made it to #1.
While Agnetha and Frida both chased international solo successes.
I remember being amazed when Phil Collins said, "Frida from Abba has asked me to do an album."
But their lives would be littered with tragedy and loss.
Agnetha was going through a very serious and dangerous situation.
She was a prisoner in her own home for nearly 2 years because of this man.
Frida lost a daughter after a car accident, which was a tragic event.
In this extraordinary documentary, we hear from the band's close friends.
I'm not surprised that they took a break because they wanted another playground.
Collaborators.
Benny told me about the project and I thought it was really exciting.
Music industry insiders.
Seeing her back as a more mature, confident woman was a really beautiful thing to see.
And stars of Mamma Mia.
They said, "Would you like to be Meryl Streep's friend in it?" And I said, "Yes."
One of the most successful movie musicals of all time.
The first day, Benny's on the piano. I said, "Let's sing Dancing Queen."
We look back at an incredible journey.
They have survived everything that the world can possibly throw at them.
And tell the remarkable story of ABBA's missing 40 years.
I still have faith in you. I see it now.
ABBA, the world's biggest-selling pop band of all time, are back in force after a 40-year break.
There was a union of heart and mind.
It's really exciting. We've all been living off the original stuff from all those years ago.
What they've done is music history.
It's just the best. ABBA have magic.
This announcement in September 2021 of a return album, Voyage, and a brand new show was the news the world had been waiting for decades.
ABBA are back together officially. This is huge.
That was just like childlike wish fulfillment.
I'm very surprised because I thought they would definitely be never going to play again.
Fans from all over the world went wild when seeing this incredible footage of Super Troopers Agnetha, Björn, Benny and Frida, now all in their 70s, reunited in a studio for the first time since they split 40 years ago.
I was really thrilled seeing these photos. Frida, she told me about this. She said it was so warm and so exciting and a bit strange, but yet very familiar.
It was so joyful to be together in the studio again, the 4 of us.
The initial project was shrouded in secrecy, and at first was only meant to be 2 songs, I Still Have Faith in You and Don't Shut Me Down.
A while ago I heard the sound of children's laughter. Now it's quiet, so I guess they left the park.
One of those people entrusted with ABBA's comeback was renowned sound engineer Bernard Lohr.
Going down, it's getting dark. I realize I'm cold.
It It was Benny that told me first about the project, and I thought it was really exciting. It was a bit scary first to see if the girls, for instance, would when they started singing, will this work? Björn and Benny was sitting in the control room just waiting to hear them sing together. But emotionally, it was, the biggest thing was when they started singing and it sounded so good.
Hearing their harmonies converge for the first time in so many years, and you thought, yeah, that can only be Abba.
Do I have it in me?
I think it's wonderful that they are there and that you can hear the age of the singers and that you can hear the maturity of them.
I felt a sense of like familiarity, which was really nice because I'm a big fan. So like hearing that, you know, was like, oh. It's like Abba, you know, it's still Abba and they're back.
You know it immediately, that style, that sound.
It's been 40 years, and it was like no time had passed. Quite amazing.
The members of Abba now look closer than ever. But rewind the clock just over 40 years, and it was a completely different story. Back in 1981, after almost 10 years of huge success, Abba seemed to be running out of steam.
The atmosphere within the group had changed a lot by then. There was a lot of tension between the four of them. I mean, they were both divorced couples now, and the motivation to do something kind of faded.
The feeling was not that happy feeling that it was in the beginning and during the whole period. It must be personal, I think. Björn and Benny have always been very close together, but I don't know about the female side.
Alongside tensions within the band, Abba's popularity was also in decline.
Sweet dreams are made of these. Who am I to disagree? I travel
With the emergence of a new youth culture in the early 80s, the Swedish pop band was losing its cool factor.
I think on every level they kind of then seemed a little bit naff, a little bit like they were kind of from that previous era of music.
Suddenly ABBA began looking a little bit passé.
And when Benny and Björn went back in the studio in May 1982 for a tentative 9th album, the internal energy had gone.
They laid down tracks including I'm the City, You Owe Me One, and Just Like That. But they weren't satisfied. It all felt very lackluster. So they had to scrap the idea of a 9th album because the songs just weren't coming.
Instead, they released a singles double album, ironically entitled The First 10 Years, which included a couple of new releases, Under Attack and The Day Before You Came.
Must have left my house at 8 because I always do.
A somber track sung by Agnetha on her own, with a simple synthesizer melody.
I must have read the morning paper going into town.
The Day Before You Came tells it all. You've suddenly come to a song which is brilliant.
I must have made my desk around 9:15.
Well, it's not ABBA.
And stopped along the way to buy some Chinese food to go.
It was actually slightly more in keeping with that kind of dark and brooding aesthetic that was more zeitgeist. But coming from ABBA, I think there was just a jarring that people didn't quite understand.
It's now held up as an ABBA classic, but at the time only reached number 32 on the UK charts.
For ABBA, that was like a massive sort of failure.
I must have gone to bed around 10:15.
By the end of '82, with Björn and Benny remarried and Frida and Agnetha not, tensions amongst the band members were intolerable.
Okay,
4 members of Abba.
Invited on Noel Edmonds' Late Breakfast show to promote their new tracks, you could have cut the atmosphere with a knife.
It was a difficult time because there was not a lot of motivation left for Abba to continue, and Björn and Benny were both fathers again.
The papers recently have been full of stories that you're going to split eventually. You're not? No. Well, they're obviously relieved to hear it. I was just going to ask you if that ever occurred to you and who would make the decision. I mean, would it be a joint decision?
It would, yes.
The tension, the body language is almost unbearable. I mean, I sort of remember it looked strange to me at the time. Frida looks so incredible. Like, she's got this punky haircut, which is a kind of classic post-divorce kind of gesture.
It's very telling because body language does not lie. So even though with their mouths they're saying, no, we're completely together, actually their behaviour is not very together.
What I'd like to do, really, is just ask you to publicly tell us your favourite ABBA tunes.
No, it's really a difficult decision because, I mean, Ben and Björn has written so many good songs.
Thank you.
Yes, but you should know about that by now.
Well, you never said that.
Okay, so it's the first time.
No one knew it then, but this incredibly uncomfortable appearance would be ABBA's last ever TV interview and would mark the beginning of a long and tumultuous 40 years apart. By the end of 1982, Björn and Benny had lost interest in composing songs for ABBA, and plans for a new album were scrapped. For a year now, they had been focused on a very different project, away from Frida and Agnetha, with top musical lyricist Tim Rice.
We were at a stage with ABBA where we felt sort of the energy running out slightly. So it was time for a pause.
Björn and Benny decided that things were coming to a close before the women were aware of what the schism was going to be and what their plans were going to be after that point.
The news of Björn and Benny working with another songwriting legend, Tim Rice, got record producers excited. And soon, a concept album for a brand new musical called Chess, with West End superstar Elaine Page, was underway.
Tim started going to and fro Stockholm to work with them. I remember this distinctly, him coming back with the initial demo tapes, mostly played on piano synth. Some of them were Benny and Björn la-laing along, you know, dummy lyrics. And they just kept on coming, one after the other.
Set during a Cold War chess tournament between two grandmasters, one American, the other Soviet, Chess tells the story of their intense professional battle and a personal one over two women.
And I just thought, wow, this is incredible. And it was a wonderful mix of music. Some of them were kind of classically operatic, others soft rock and pop, and even rap.
Oriental setting in the city, don't know what the city is.
In the ABBA Museum in Stockholm, curator Ingmarie has dedicated a whole section to this monumental project that Björn and Benny slaved over for 5 years.
I'm not at all surprised that they actually took a break from ABBA because they wanted to get to know another playground, which was the musical. They took all the good things from ABBA into the musical world. If you listen to songs like One Night in Bangkok, that's a pop song.
It's a different concept, it's a different challenge, but arguably, Chess has got songs that were probably more suited to ABBA than anybody else.
And the most recognizable song from Chess is another female duet featuring Elaine Page and Barbara Dickson.
Wasn't it good? Oh, so good. Wasn't he fine? Oh, so fine. Isn't it madness? He can't be mine.
Of course, there is ABBA in the bottom. I mean, you can actually hear Frida and Agnetha.
Well, it was a challenge, you know, because I wanted to do my best. I remember thinking the attention to detail. There was nothing missed. Even the slightest thing. If it wasn't quite right for some reason or the rhythm was a bit, you know, no, it would all be done again.
No, it's, well, at least she's a good-looking spy. Bum, bum, bum. What if my Russian you can sing it like that.
So leave another beat.
Yes.
It was fantastic for me because I'm kind of the same myself. It can drive people mad, but for me, I loved it.
Wasn't it good? So good. Wasn't he fine? Isn't it madness? He won't be mine. Didn't I know?
I Know Him So Well hit #1 in the UK charts and went on to become one of the best-selling female duets of all time.
Chess was fantastic. I mean, that was the best score of the 1980s.
I know him so
On the back of the worldwide success of the concept album, a West End stage show in London was inevitable.
I can't imagine Benny and Björn being daunted or nervous about anything ever. But when Chess launched at the West End, there was a huge amount of international interest.
When it comes to the opening of Chess, of course, it was a ton of stress.
I believe I'm right in saying was, at that time, the most expensive musical ever to open in the West End.
Despite a staggering £4 million budget, the musical opened to mixed reviews. But the experience of making Chess gave Benny and Björn an exciting new career trajectory.
It was the beginning for them, I think, to branch out into musical theatre. It didn't put them off, did it?
While the boys had been immersed in chess, both Frida and Agnetha were left wondering where the next Abba song was coming from.
They don't have the security of Björn and Benny anymore. Two men that they've been working very closely with, and all of a sudden you're like out on your own. It must be really scary.
Frida found herself in a unique position as being a solo artist by default.
And her musical inspiration came from an unlikely and very British rock star.
On her way to summer house, her daughter played her a cassette, which was Face Value, the album of Phil Collins.
In the Air Tonight, the album's standout hit, was darkly atmospheric and featured angry lyrics concerning Phil Collins' bitter divorce. And it cut Frida to the core.
She loved the Face Value album that Phil and I had done together. It was a personal thing as well. I think she felt attracted to the songs that he'd written related to his divorce.
Inspired by Face Value, Frida found the strength to break free from Abba and record a solo album. And she asked Phil Collins to produce it.
Abba has been working for 10 years now. And in a way, I feel that I'm stuck in a pattern, you know. And as my life has changed so completely in other respects, I feel that it's a necessity to change even the musical aspect.
I remember being amazed when Phil said, "Oh, Frida from Abba has asked us to do an album. Let's do it."
Hugh Padgham was part of the all-British crew who, with Phil Collins, headed to Stockholm to record the album in Abba's very own Polar Studios.
I was very, very tense and nervous. It was the first thing I had done outside Abba, and all the people were new for me. I had met Phil twice, and the others I hadn't met at all.
Everything was kind of strange to her, and she was so nervous, and that she had to call in the sick the next day, so the second day of recording.
Okay, a little bit of guitar, please.
I can imagine if I'd been in her shoes and being outside your comfort zone like that, it would have been quite nerve-wracking. Because we all knew each other, so she was like thrown in with all these guys.
I can't even imagine what it was like, because I know what I've been through. I've been in way too many sessions where it's like me and 5 men. Just being in that room is intimidating in itself.
She was kind of subdued and a little bit timid, and she didn't really dare to say what she wanted in the album, what she wanted to be like. Phil was kind of annoyed about this and tried to convince her to speak out and to say, it's your album, baby, he said. You have to decide.
You made me look into your eyes.
But eventually, Frida and her new band bonded.
Well, when she found out that they were a team, a kind of small family, then she kind of felt at ease and found her self-confidence again.
Well, you know what I mean, man.
She had this sort of hair thing going on, and when she was singing, she used to put her headphones on under her hair. She didn't want to mess her hair up. She was great. She became one of the boys.
But Frida's attempt to go solo and find her own style away from Abba raised an eyebrow with their manager and Polar Studios boss, Stig Andersson.
Stig Andersson wasn't happy at all with the way the album was going, because what he wanted was songs, a pop song with a very strong hook.
I remember Stig saying something that made Frida cry. Stig didn't think that there was a hit on the album, and he asked Björn and Benny to come up with some songs.
It's almost like, well, she can't possibly do it on her own, undermining the potential that a woman might actually have something to offer in her own right.
But Frida was quite forceful. She said, no way.
Frida proved Stig wrong, and the stomping title track, There's Something Going On, tellingly about a woman who suspects her lover is having an affair, was an international hit.
It was a big departure from what Abba was recording before.
She clearly said, Phil, whatever you did on In the Air Tonight, I'd like quite a lot more of that.
She was marking out her territory as a solo artist. She's saying, forget about Abba. I don't sound like that anymore. I don't look like that anymore. You need to take me as I am now.
The critical and commercial success of the album was just what Frida needed as she moved further away from Abba.
He was extremely proud of the record. This was something she did by herself.
I imagine Frida was like, there you go, you know, I can do it without you lot.
On a wave of solo success, Frida cut herself free from her old record label and moved to London.
She wanted to reinvent herself, and she was kind of held back in Sweden because she was reminded of everything of her life before, of Benny, of a divorce.
Despite there being no news of an official ABBA split, now Frida had scored solo success, Agnetha looked to do the same. And ABBA looked increasingly like a thing of the past. Like Frida, Agnetha turned to a music industry giant to produce her solo album.
Mike Chapman was a very famous and successful producer in the 80s. He'd worked with lots of bands, the most famous being, of course, Blondie with the amazing Debbie Harry. And he was all about hits, mainstream success, but retaining coolness at the same time.
This was something she wanted to do. It was somewhere she wanted to be. It was with a producer who was encouraging her and challenging her and pushing her voice in slightly different directions than perhaps Benny and Björn had been doing. So it was a very happy atmosphere for her.
Keen to get away from her reputation as the forlorn-looking one who sang the sad ABBA songs, Agnetha plumped for an upbeat album filled with feel-good numbers, like the album's biggest hit, The Heat Is On.
Wrap Your Arms Around Me was a very positive summer kind of album with a lot of romanticism in it.
Agnetha, who had never been a fan of interviews during the Abba years, was now having to brave the cameras and promote her album alone.
It was something she knew she had to do rather than something she wanted to do.
Despite or because of maybe her beauty, there was a nervousness about just being seen as being the face rather than being a serious musician and a serious professional.
This wasn't helped when she suffered this excruciating interview on BBC Breakfast Time.
We're here to promote the record, and there's an album coming out later in the month, which is called...
Yeah, the album comes the last of May, and it's called Wrap Your Arms Around Me.
I might. But tell me, why are you sweet or universally so infuriatingly beautiful? A friend of mine called you clones. He says every time you see a Swedish woman or know you're going to meet one, you know she's going to be beautiful.
The constant focus on her physicality, her beauty, her sexiness was extremely destructive for Agnetha. It hurt her sense of confidence as an artist.
And when asked about the future of Abba, Agnetha appeared optimistic.
Frida's working for herself and I'm working for myself, but we still try to keep the group together.
But within a couple of years, Agnetha and Frida would make life decisions that would shock fans the world over and shatter any hopes of a reunion. 2 years after the unofficial ABBA split, Björn and Benny were devoted to their musical chess, and Agnetha had released her pop solo album, Wrap Your Arms Around Me. On the back of her successful collaboration with Phil Collins, Frida was confidently building her solo career outside Sweden and ABBA. Determined to continue her reinvention as a successful solo star, she travelled to Paris to work with a young and high-flying producer, Steve Lillywhite.
Steve Lillywhite at that point was absolutely at the top of the production tree. He'd worked with some really, really cutting-edge kind of bands in the 70s, you know, worked with Ultravox and Susie and the Banshees, the Psychedelic Furs, had this sort of great kind of cachet in that experimental and electronic music.
Now back in the studio, in a foreign land and with a complete new set of musicians, Frida was once again setting herself a huge challenge.
She is freshening it up all over again. She's very experimental. She's very much at the cutting edge.
Well, Frida was very positive about working with Steve Lillywhite, but everyone was very young. Frida was, I think, 10 years older than the producer.
Frida had a strong personal input in her new album, Shine. With this quirky music video for its title track, she projected a fresh and futuristic image of herself and an all-out 80s thrashing musical style.
It's very much about punching into the 80s. A very aerobics-inspired choreography. The wardrobe is all neon, all plastic, lots of shoulder pads, very angular.
Despite Frida's enthusiasm for an album she was extremely proud of, Shine flopped.
Frida was very disappointed because she really felt 100% for this album. She felt like she was opened up creatively.
She probably wanted to try and prove the Stig Andersons of this world wrong. So when the album wasn't successful commercially, that would have knocked that confidence back quite considerably.
It seemed like success was kind of fading away, so everything kind of stopped.
Her confidence knocked, and approaching 40, Frida quit the fast pace of London. search of a new way of life, she headed to the tranquility of Switzerland.
Frida's reinvented herself multiple times in her life, and she has a kind of driving ambition. So even though she endures failures and setbacks, she's not completely tanked by it. She simply changes direction. It takes a huge amount of inner strength to be able to do that.
Back in Sweden, Agnetha was also struggling with the tough realities of going solo. An ongoing battle with the tabloid press made life increasingly unbearable.
Agnetha was the honeypot that the flies of the Swedish tabloid press started to swarm around. Because she was always a very private and sensitive person, they kind of latched on that and wanted to know more. She was no longer protected by the Abba bubble, and she found it very difficult to cope with it.
Throughout the 1980s, unpleasant and often fictitious tabloid tales concerning Agnetha and her private life appeared on an almost daily basis.
They were linking her romantically to men that she wasn't involved with. There were stories on the front pages that she was pregnant when she wasn't. And then when a baby didn't appear, the stories were Agnetha has suffered a miscarriage.
Feeling under siege from the media, Agnetha became increasingly reclusive, refusing to do any promotional work on releasing new material.
She just didn't want to do that anymore. I mean, there's loads of interviews you can see where you can see she just doesn't want to be there.
The only recourse she had was to say no. I'm not doing your interviews. So she began to withdraw more and more into seclusion.
Agnetha did have one final throw of the dice when in 1988 she flew to London to promote an album on the Wogan chat show. The track she chose to sing was fittingly titled The Last Time.
Kind of felt listening to it that this was a woman saying goodbye in many ways. She was now in her late 30s, pushing 40. She didn't feel she had the motivation on her side. She now just wanted to be a mother, and her pop career now was behind her.
You obviously still want to put yourself through the rigmarole of pop music.
Yes, well, it just happens, you know. It's hard to get away from it.
It would definitely have been one of those moments where she didn't really want to be there, her heart wasn't in it anymore.
But one would have imagined that you would have bought yourself the little house on the fjord and just retired.
Well, I have.
Well, you have.
This was indeed Agnetha's last time. Shortly after her BBC appearance, she moved to the quiet island of Eckerö, 45 minutes outside Stockholm. After 2 decades in the limelight, an exhausted Agnetha was about to disappear from the public eye.
I thought I have to have a little break now, and I've done so much. I want to be with my children and in my home and with the horses and with my dogs.
Whilst Agnetha and Frida withdrew from music and public life, the experience of creating the musical Chess had Benny keen to do more. Teaming up with Björn once again, he embarked on an epic Swedish project that reconnected him with his folk music roots. A musical based on a classic Swedish novel, Kristina från Duvemåla, with themes close to Benny's heart, as he revealed in this interview.
It's dealing with the fact that over 1 million Swedish people emigrated to America in the 19th century.
Kristina från Duvemåla couldn't be further away from the glitter and the gloss and the spandex of the Abba years. You've got a very strong story about survivalism, migration, the Swedish national character.
There's some beautiful songs in that. It just shows the versatility, doesn't it, of what they can do and can write.
What they've been able to do over the years is move their style from that immediate 3-minute pop song, and they've been able to broaden it out. I think that anything that Benny and Björn seem to do is magic.
Kristina från Duvemåla was a critical and commercial hit in Sweden, attracting an audience of more than 1 million people and elevating Björn and Benny to national treasure status. Meanwhile, over 1,000 miles away in Switzerland, Frida's life was about to mirror that of a fairy tale when she met and fell in love with a German prince.
Russo förändrade mitt liv enormt mycket. Och han förde med sig glädje och kärlek och 2 nya barn, mina styvdöttrar.
She looked more relaxed and more at ease with herself. She had overcome a lot of insecurities. She has a more classy look now. She's not so rock-edged anymore.
The romance with Prince Russo-Rus resulted in a marriage in 1992.
Frida's personal journey has been completely fascinating. She went from being the orphaned child to a global superstar, to stepping away from fame, and then marrying into German royalty, on top of being musical royalty herself.
With Frida living a new, exclusive life in Switzerland, Agnetha retreating to her remote Swedish island, and Benny and Björn dedicating themselves to their Swedish musical, by the early 90s, the former Abba members couldn't have been further apart. But an unexpected revival was about to send the world Abba crazy once again.
I really fell in love with them when I took my daughter and my nieces to see Mamma Mia the musical.
June 1992. Appearing in front of a huge crowd, Benny and Björn were invited on stage by U2 to play a stripped-down version of their absolute classic hit, Dancing Queen. Ten years after the band's unofficial split, they were reconnecting with ABBA's music.
There was a moment when Benny and Björn changed their mind. Instead of running away from ABBA, in the 90s they decided to turn around and run straight back towards ABBA.
After being ignored for almost a decade, the music of ABBA captured the zeitgeist once again.
There was absolutely a need and a desire for optimism. The 90s went back into having this no-holds-barred, front and centre pop music. So it was really a great breeding ground decade for the shine.
Do them live, had to do them just to get them out of my system, the songs.
ABBA
bubbling in the zeitgeist, and we just happened to put this thing out at the same time, and I'm really glad that I was part of it.
ABBA's record label jumped on the revival wagon, and that same year released ABBA Gold, a compilation of all their greatest hits that cemented a legacy that Björn and Benny could never have dreamt of.
The songs are just classic pop songs, and a classic good pop song just won't die.
The album sold over 5 million copies within a year of release.
We were in the height of the CD era then, so this was
racked up in every supermarket, record shop, anywhere that sold music. So that was the opportunity for women in particular to be able to kind of grab the CD off the shelf, play it, dance around the kitchen with their kids, introduce those songs to that up-and-coming generation as well.
I don't even know if it has been out of the charts in the 30 years since it was released. That really was the catalyst of their reappraisal.
After Abba Gold, it was like full speed ahead.
Whilst the world was once again going ABBA mad, Frida, now happy and settled in her private life and encouraged by her prince, made an unexpected return to Sweden to record new music.
Sex. Okay, vi tar på mig.
She wanted to do an album that meant something to her, which would go a little bit further than just doing an album.
But having spent a decade away from the studio, the return was challenging.
När man inte tränar dagligen så blir ju också den muskeln som heter stämman slapp, precis som många andra muskler som man inte tränar. Och sen så sjunker rösten med ålder. Det är inte så mycket man kan göra åt. Den hamnar alltså i ett lägre läge.
Frida's efforts paid off and resulted in this elegant single, Oven and Blomma.
The song was about inner growth, the evolvement of herself as a person, as a woman, the journey she had been on, and also nature and how important it was to care about nature.
The album was a massive hit in Sweden. And on a personal level, Frida was deeply satisfied with the compositions and the themes it explored. Meanwhile, as the resurging interest in ABBA's music grew, in London, Björn and Benny were in talks about an exciting new project. A musical built around their greatest hits that would introduce ABBA to an even wider audience.
I really discovered them when I took my daughter and my nieces to see Mamma Mia the musical. Not thinking I was going to, sorry boys, not thinking I was going to enjoy it at all. And I was just blown away by it.
The musical was the brainchild of theatre producer Judy Kramer, who came up with the idea while working on Chess with Björn and Benny a decade earlier.
It was one woman's obsession with ABBA that actually got this musical off the ground. I mean, she lives ABBA, I think, Judy.
I know Judy Kramer had approached Benny and Björn many times over saying, please let me do this, please let me do this.
And they said no, for starters.
But on a warm summer evening in 1995, after enjoying Grease on the West End stage, Björn had a change of heart and saw the potential in Judy Kramer's idea.
And then they said, yes, come up with a good script.
Now under pressure to come up with a good story, Judy Kramer turned to playwright Katherine Johnson.
The plot of Mamma Mia was hashed out at Paddington Station, probably over a congealed sandwich and a cold coffee, by Judy Kramer and her collaborator Katherine Johnson, who was a traditional, very respected, old-school theatre lady.
Thoughts started spinning, and suddenly Katherine had this vision.
What about a young girl? She doesn't know who her father is, and she's getting married, and she invites 3 guys who could be her dad based on her mum's diary, and they all show up at this lovely Grecian event.
And then Judy just said to her, you're not taking the train, you're sitting down. Now we're working.
It sounds so crackers, but it's a very strong idea, because it's all about love and family and belonging, and that's what ABBA's about.
Judy then turned to celebrated theatre director Frida Lloyd to complete the all-female creative team.
I loved it that there was a team of women. It just makes it feel special and empowering in many ways.
When word got out that production was underway, the project made headlines all over the world. leaving Agnetha and Frida to hear about it at the same time as everybody else.
When Frida heard about the musical Mamma Mia through the media, it was reported that the musical would be about the story of Abba. She immediately sent off an angry fax to Björn saying like, oh, what the hell do you think you're doing?
But once again, the tabloid press was speculating and had got it wrong.
Björn, of course, replied that it wasn't the case at all. It was a completely different story. After which he eventually became one of its investors.
When the show opened in London on the 6th of April 1999, it was the talk of the town.
If you weren't at the premiere, at the first night, I mean, forget it, you're just in social Siberia.
The musical's launch coincided beautifully with the 25th anniversary of Abba winning the Eurovision Song Contest with Waterloo. The audience went wild.
I don't think I've ever experienced something like that. It was like, I don't know, a mashup between a late night disco and a theater. It was amazing.
Oh, it's magic. People were chuckling, and then people were laughing, and then people were dancing and laughing.
Mamma Mia became one of the highest-grossing musicals of all time, generating another huge wave of Abba fans.
The music was just so infectious and so uplifting and so moving that I immediately bought the album.
It makes a journey out of the music in a way that was incredibly appealing to people that had missed out on ABBA first time round.
A lot of people in my age who weren't really like super into pop, that was their first introduction to ABBA songs.
With a tidal wave of new ABBA fans, the world media became obsessed with a possible ABBA reunion.
Are you surprised that ABBA keeps coming back and back and back? Are you surprised?
Yeah. No, we never came back. That's the good thing about ABBA.
No, we never reunited.
But on that opening night, while Björn and Benny were heralding an ABBA revival, Agnetha and Frida were nowhere to be seen.
The great ABBA revival of the 1990s came along at the wrong time for Agnetha. This was a very dark period, probably the worst period in her life.
The glitzy opening of the most anticipated musical in decades, Mamma Mia. An outright success for songwriters Benny and Björn. But that night, there were two conspicuous absentees.
What do Agnetha and Frida think about this? Have they seen it?
We don't know yet because they haven't been here yet. No. They should come because they are as much a part of this as we are.
"700 miles away in Switzerland, Frida had found inner peace close to nature with her beloved husband, Prince Russo. And she was slowly reconnecting with music. But on a dark winter's day in 1998, her happiness was shattered when she received the tragic news no mother wants to hear.
She lost her daughter after a car accident, which was a tragic event which struck very hard.
This tragedy left Frida in a state of shock for many years, as she revealed in this intimate 2016 interview.
Det tog väldigt lång tid. Det tog väldigt många år. Och av en obegriplig sorg. Jag vet att man känner sådär att men vi börjar gråta, det ska jag inte göra.
While dealing with this unbearable grief, a year later, tragedy struck again. Her beloved husband Russo passed away at the age of 49, leaving a huge void in her life, as she reflected in the same interview.
Och han var en absolut fantastisk, underbar, spirituell, rolig människa. Jag älskade honom överallt. Så det var klart en jättesorg att det här skulle drabba oss, att han fick cancer, 49 år gammal.
Plunged into deep grief, Frida once again stepped away from music and public life. In her island seclusion, Agnetha was also deep in grief. After the tragic loss of her mother, who took her own life, and the death of her father soon after.
This was a very dark period for her, probably the worst period in her life. And she just needed to be left alone. She needed time to process all of these traumatic things that had happened to her.
But it made her vulnerable. It made her vulnerable to being targeted, not just physically and practically, but also emotionally.
And someone did indeed take advantage of Agnetha's emotional vulnerability.
She had somehow become involved with a crazed stalker fan called Gert van der Graaf. He was a forklift driver, he was Dutch, he was obsessive, he made no secret of it.
He found out where Agnetha lived, and eventually he bought a ramshackle little wooden house about a mile from Agnetha's house. And every day he would post a letter in her letterbox. She had reached a point in her life where I think she was just very fragile, and the idea that there was somebody out there living close to her that was interested in her, that wanted to get to know her. I think she felt slightly worn down by him, but was willing to see why did he want to know her, so she opened up her life to him.
And they had some kind of twisted romance that she broke away from after a short period of time, but he continued to stalk and harass her with thousands of phone calls and letters.
The media label her as a recluse. What they didn't understand was that she was too frightened to leave her house.
After years of legal battles, Gert was eventually given a restraining order and was banned from entering Sweden. With van der Graaf safely out of the country and keen to put the whole distressing affair behind her, Agnetha felt ready to return to her true passion.
Agnetha was free to rebuild her fragile emotional health. And one of the ways she started to do that was listening to music again. And it was the music that she had fallen in love with as a teenager. It was the music of Connie Francis and Dusty Springfield. And now, 40 years later, they inspired her to be a singer again.
It was amazing to see Agnetha coming back, being able to represent herself now as a more mature woman.
I'm a big admirer of her voice, the way she sings. I think she's one of the best Swedish vocalists ever.
Despite Agnetha keeping public appearances to a minimum, fans and the media began speculating about an Abba reunion.
If she's now interested in making music again, is this going to be the key that unlocks the great Abba reunion?
But instead of a reunion, Benny and Björn preferred to focus their efforts on developing the hugely successful Mamma Mia franchise and took it to another level.
Well, my agent rang me up, standing in the kitchen and him saying, they're going to make a film of Mamma Mia, the musical. And I said, yeah. And they said, would you like to be Meryl Streep's friend in it? And I said, yes, of course I would. I love that musical, yes.
Based on the stage show, the movie attracted a stellar cast.
Mamma Mia is pure escapism. It's a vision of the world where everyone is literally singing and dancing all the time.
When the cast met for the first time to record the soundtrack at Air Studios in London, they were faced with the musical complexity of ABBA songs.
It's a bit of a baptism of fire. First of all, you go and you meet Meryl Streep, and I've never met her. Then you're taken through, and there are the ABBA boys. Benny's on the piano. He said, let's sing Dancing Queen. God, we've only just got in. I've only rehearsed a couple of days. So we were all around the piano doing that, but it was fine.
To ensure the ABBA magic was kept in the soundtrack, Benny and Björn attended most recording sessions with their trusted sound engineer, Bernard Lohr.
They are actors, not professional singers, so I had to work a little bit more in editing and fixing.
They want it right. It's their music, it's their baby, isn't it? So you felt a huge responsibility as well, much more responsibility because they were there. But they gave me confidence. Not the opposite. You'd think, but they didn't. They certainly gave me confidence, yeah.
The confidence instilled in the actors shone through when Julie Walters, Meryl Streep and Christine Baranski performed this comedic take on Dancing Queen.
You are a dancing queen, young and sweet, only 17.
If bearing the weight of ABBA's musical legacy wasn't daunting enough, the actors also had to dance. This proved a struggle for the male leads.
They're not great fans of it, really, the singing and dancing, I don't think. I can remember Colin's face, absolutely terrified at the thought of this dancing.
Julie Walters' dance skills were also put to the test when she performed Take a Chance on Me in front of the entire cast in the film's wedding party climax.
If you're all alone, when the pretty birds have flown high, I'm still free. Take a chance on me.
The choreographer said to me, well, you can do what you like down the table. I said, oh, OK, then, so I didn't have to rehearse it. I didn't want to rehearse it in front of everybody, which was a big mistake. So come the day, all of the dancers and people are there, all of the cast are down, and I have to go down that table. I had a coughing fit in sort of anxiety and had to have a brown paper bag, like this. But it was great fun after that.
Take a chance on me. Take a chance on me.
The songs just didn't get boring, ever. When you're filming a scene, they go on for days, and they still didn't get boring. It still made you want to, yeah, here we come again.
Mamma Mia was to become one of the highest-grossing musical movies of all time.
It's just a really intelligent, huge move for keeping that ABBA legacy alive. It's like this sort of cyclical thing that can happen across the decades.
And when the film premiered in Stockholm in July 2008, ABBA fans were in for a treat. Björn and Benny were joined for the first time in 22 years by Frida and Agnetha, who'd stepped out of the shadows to surprise the cast.
The photographers were screaming out for them just to be the four of them, but they always refused because they felt that if there was a photograph of the four of them, that would be the photograph that would be in the press. And this wasn't about ABBA, this was about Mamma Mia.
It may have been about Mamma Mia, but seeing them together had fans starting to think what was until then the unthinkable.
That whole kind of excitement about the what if, could it really happen, definitely came back in, and people started thinking, well, never say never. Keep our fingers crossed, maybe it will.
London 2013. At the annual Children in Need Rocks charity event, Gary Barlow performs a duet that drives ABBA fans into a frenzy.
This young lady's not been on stage for over 25 years.
Gary Barlow had pulled off the impossible as he coaxed an anxious Agnetha back on stage for this powerful performance of I Should Have Followed You Home.
Can't believe it's really you. You still look the way you used to.
It's obvious that Agnetha is nervous. She's looking at Gary Barlow for reassurance. And then that stone-cold professionalism kicks in. Her voice is amazing. It's like listening to running silver.
If you want to, I'll see you soon again.
Knowing what she's been through, I think a lot of fans just want her to be happy. And seeing her on stage again, she genuinely seemed happy.
I'm so glad to be here tonight. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, everyone.
Her confidence now growing, Agnetha embraced the Mamma Mia musical phenomenon and started attending promotional events.
In coming back out into public life, Agnetha is leaving the door open for the Abba reunion, because let's not forget, they never broke up. You know, putting something on standby is not the same as unplugging it.
A couple of years later, at a private event, Agnetha went back on stage, this time with Frida. And that night, the two of them truly brought the dream of an Abba reunion one step closer.
We would love to dedicate this song to you from us, Agnetha and myself.
2016 was the 50th anniversary of the day that Benny and Björn met. Agnetha and Frida naturally were invited, but what we didn't think happened was that they would get on stage and sing a song.
The only record of that special moment is this mobile phone footage of Frida and Agnetha reunited in song for the first time in over 30 years.
It was totally right that they were on stage. That was great. And also the fact that they were singing the way old friends do, because that's what it is. They are old friends.
With friendships rekindled, in 2018 it finally happened. Abba announced they were getting back together for a very special show.
When the news came out, everyone just had this sort of frisson of excitement, thinking, does this mean they're going to tour again? Is there an album? What's going to be happening?
But it wasn't the return that everyone was expecting.
I have a vision of the future.
And in that future, Abba were to return not as themselves, but as avatars. Using motion capture technology, an extraordinary series of concerts were to see Abba return as digitally animated characters based on their 1979 younger selves.
It's something in their makeup and their psyche that they're always kind of ahead of the game, and nobody else has done this, have they, before? A virtual tour. Brilliant.
And for Abba fans, the dream was about to get even better. Whilst working on the Avatar project, the urge to make new music became irresistible. For the first time in almost 4 decades, Abba recorded a new song behind closed doors.
I think they kept it a secret to see if it will work. I mean, to come back after 40 years, it gives you insecurity. Maybe, is this the right thing? But to hear the voices of Frida and Agnetha is fantastic.
I still have faith in you. I see it now.
You couldn't have chosen a more perfect ABBA comeback song than I Still Have Faith in You.
And it's like a love song to themselves and to history and to time.
There was a union.
I see a sense of reconciliation and an increased comfort between the members of the band.
That song to me was a beautiful story of how they can look back at all their memories that they have shared and experienced and still be excited to create more. I think that's very inspiring.
Since going their separate ways 40 years ago, the 4 members of ABBA have experienced a roller coaster of triumphs, adversity, and tragedy.
They went through pain and trials and tribulations and suffering, and yet they're still friends.
And underpinning those 4 tumultuous decades is a musical legacy that has grown beyond all expectations.
My God, that is an incredible tribute. Incredible to think that somebody's had the career and Here we are 40 years later, and it's still as prevalent.
I don't know what kind of artist I would have been, or if I even would have been here right now if it wasn't for Abba.
It's a gift. They got the gift.
Kind of goes on and on and on. It gets to people. It's magic.